Right, so now we are up to memory, chapter 6 of Essentials of Psychology, Concepts and Applications. So in this chapter, we will be going over how you may identify as well as describe or explain the basic processes and stages of memory. We're going to take a look at the different types of long-term memory, as well as hopefully be able to explain how the semantic network model and levels of processing theory in memory works. We'll be also going over applied constructionist theory. That's going to help you to be able to describe and explain some of the memory distortions. We'll look into identifying factors that would influence the reliability, particularly in eyewitness testimony. We'll continue on by looking at the concepts of recovered memory and why it's so controversial. We'll then talk about major theories as well as factors in terms of forgetting. Hopefully you'll be able to explain at the end of this chapter why recognition tests of memory generally produce better results than recall tests. We'll also look at amnesia and the types of amnesia that's known. We'll also look at the different brain structures that's involved with memory and looking into the roles of neuronal networks and long-term potentiation. We'll also talk about genetics and how it plays a role in memory. And then last but not least, we'll learn how to apply that knowledge of how memory can work and how you can build your memory stores. So with that being said, let's start with remembering.
There are three core processes of memory. First, there's encoding, getting it in. Encoding is like turning on the record button in your brain. It's the process of taking in information and converting it into a form your memory system can use. It's kind of like saving a document in a specific file format. When you read notes aloud, visualize an image, or make a funny association. I met Bob at the coffee shop. Bob likes coffee beans. You're helping your brain encode that information more effectively. Think of it as translation, turning sights, sounds, and thoughts into neural code your brain can store. The second process is storage, keeping it in. Once information is encoded, it needs to stick around. That's storage, the process of retaining information over time. Your memory isn't one big warehouse. It's more like a system with shelves. Sensory memory, super brief. Short-term working memory, about 20 seconds. And long-term memory, potentially for life. The stronger the connections, through rehearsal, emotion, or meaning, the easier it is to keep that information from slipping off the shelf. Then there's number 3, retrieval, getting it out. Retrieval is like opening the right file or finding that mental sticky note when you need it. It's the process of accessing stored information and bringing it into consciousness so you can use it. Sometimes retrieval is automatic. What's your name? At other times it needs a cue, something that jogs your memory.
Right, so now it's time for that knowledge check activity. Which term describes the process of converting information into a form that can be stored in memory? Would it be A, encoding, B, storage, or C, retrieval? What do you think? Yeah, I know it's not the greatest, but I'm moving on now. If you came up with the answer encoding, you would be correct. Remember, encoding is that way of how we get information in our memory system, and it occurs through automatic or effortful processing. And then storage is when we're trying to retain the information and put it into memory. Finally, again, when we're talking about retrieval, that's that process of taking the information out of storage and bringing it back to conscious awareness through our recall or through recognition as well as relearning. So let's move on.
Now we will discuss the stages of memory. Let's start with the three-stage model of memory. Our memory system works a lot like a filtering and storage process. Information passes through three main stages depending on how long it's kept and what we do with it. Sensory memory, short-term memory, long-term memory. With sensory memory, this is the first glance. Our sensory memory is our brain's instant snapshot system. It holds raw information from our senses for just a moment. It's like your brain saying, "Wait, what was that?" before deciding whether to pay attention or move on. The sensory register is this brief holding zone for everything your eyes, ears, and other senses pick up. Iconic memory is your visual store. It keeps an image in your mind for just a fraction of a second after you've seen it, like when you blink and can still see what was there. Echoic memory is your auditory store. It keeps a sound for a few seconds after you've heard it, like when someone says, "What?" but then answers, before you repeat yourself. That's echoic memory at work. Sensory memory lasts just long enough for your brain to decide, should I keep this or toss it? Then we have our short-term memory. We can call this the mental workbench. If your brain determines the info is worth keeping, it moves the information into short-term memory, or STM, where you hold and work with it briefly. Short-term memory lasts about 15 to 30 seconds unless you rehearse it, like repeating the phone number in your head. It's limited. You can usually hold about 7 plus or minus 2 bits of info at once. That's why phone numbers are just the right length. You use short-term memory for tasks such as solving problems, following directions, or taking notes while listening to a lecture. Now we come to long-term memory, better known as the vault. If you keep rehearsing or attach meaning to the information, it moves into long-term memory, or LTM, your brain's deep storage system. With long-term memory, we can hold information for minutes, hours, years, or even a lifetime. This is where facts, skills, and personal memories live. Unlike short-term memory, it's basically limitless. You won't run out of space, though sometimes retrieval can be tricky. Let's look at some examples showing each stage with the duration and the function. So, with sensory memory, again, the duration is from half to 3 seconds at the most. The function at this point is first to capture the raw sensory information. Think of when you see lightning strike or hear your name being called. With short-term memory, the duration is again relatively short, lasting approximately 30 seconds. The function here is to hold and briefly process the information in your brain, such as remembering a phone number long enough to dial it. Although with smartphones, we tend not to do that much today either. However, I hope you understand what I mean. Then finally, with long-term memory, the duration is unlimited. The primary function here is to store information for future use, like remembering the name of your childhood best friend. Understanding short-term memory, your brain's mental holding space. As you recall, short-term memory is your brain's temporary workspace, the place where new information hangs out for a few seconds while you decide what to do with it. We also refer to it as working memory because it's where your brain processes information, solves problems, recalls a phone number just long enough to dial it, or keeps track of what I said to you while you jot down notes. However, here's the catch. Short-term memory can only hold information for about 20 to 30 seconds, unless you actively do something to keep it there. It's kind of like having a few sticky notes on your mental desk. They'll stay for a minute, But if you don't rewrite or store them somewhere else, they'll peel off and disappear. So the question is, how much can we hold? Psychologist George Miller famously discovered what's now called the magic number, 7, give or take 2. Basically, most people can remember about 5 to 9 bits of information at a time. For example, if someone reads off a list of random digits, 4, 9, 2, 8, 6, 1, 5, you can probably repeat them back right away. But if they keep going, 7, 3, 4, 9, 2, 1, 8, 5, 6, 0, your brain starts to drop the extras like a juggler with too many balls in the air. Therefore, there are steps we can take to enhance our ability to absorb information. First, there's chunking. To overcome the limitations of short-term memory, we employ a clever strategy called chunking, breaking down large pieces of information into smaller, more manageable chunks. For instance, instead of remembering 4-7-3-2-9-5-8-6, you might group it as 4732 and 9586, 2 chunks instead of 8 random digits. Or think of how we naturally remember phone numbers as 601-555-2025. Chunking. Let's review how we turn short-term memories into long-term ones, the art of consolidation. Again, I want you to imagine your brain as a giant filing system. When something new happens, such as meeting someone named Jordan at a party, that information first lands in short-term memory. But if it's going to stick around long enough to matter, Jordan from Psychology 201 who loves dogs, it needs to be consolidated. Consolidation is basically your brain's way of saying, okay, this one's important. Let's file it for long-term storage. It's the process of converting short-term memories into long-term memories, kind of like hitting save on your mental hard drive. Sleep, by the way, plays a huge role here. That's why cramming all night rarely works. Your brain needs downtime to do its filing. Making memories stick. This is done through elaborative rehearsal. Now, if you repeat information over and over, Jordan, 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 it might stay for a bit. But to really make it last, you've got to use elaborative rehearsal, which means connecting new info to something you already know. So instead of mindlessly repeating Jordan, you might think Jordan, like Michael Jordan, who played basketball. Jordan from Psychology 201 loves dogs, so I'll picture him walking his dog. That's your brain creating meaningful associations between the new memory and existing knowledge. It's like adding sticky notes, doodles, and tabs to a mental file, making it easier to find later. Now, looking at the semantic network model, how ideas ripple through the mind. Here's where it gets fascinating. According to the semantic network model, your memories aren't stored like separate files in isolated drawers. Instead, they're interconnected nodes in a vast web. So when you think of one concept, say dog, it triggers related ideas. Puppy means leash, means to walk, means to go to the park, means to play with a frisbee, reminds you of your childhood. Each thought activates nearby concepts, creating a ripple effect across your memory network. That's why one smell, sound, or word can unlock a whole flood of memories. Ever smelled your grandma's cookies and instantly felt like you were 8 again? That's the network lighting up. Levels of processing theory. Shallow versus deep thinking. Finally, there's the levels of processing theory, which says the deeper you think about information, the better you'll remember it. If you just memorize a definition by rote, That's shallow processing, like skimming a headline. However, if you analyze, relate it to real life, visualize it, or apply it, that's deep processing. And deep processing leads to durable memory. Think of it this way. Shallow processing equals, I've seen that word before. Deep processing equals, I understand what it means, how it works, and how it connects to something I already know. So, the moral of the memory story? Don't just memorize. Connect, relate, and reflect. Your brain isn't a filing cabinet. It's a living network that thrives on meaning, association, and curiosity. Long-term memory, the brain's big storage system. Once your brain decides that information is worth keeping, it moves it into long-term memory, your mental library. Here, memories can last from a few hours to a lifetime. Yep, that random song lyric from middle school is still in there somewhere. But not all long-term memories are the same. In fact, they come in two main types that handle different kinds of knowledge. Declarative, also known as explicit memory, which is about what you know. Then there's procedural, implicit memory, which is what you can do. Let's break those down into layman's language. Declarative memory, knowing that. Declarative memory is the type of memory you can use to talk about facts, events, and experiences you can consciously recall and describe. It's called explicit because you can bring it to mind intentionally, like pulling up a mental file when someone asks a question. There are two main subtypes. 1. Episodic memory. This is your personal diary. It's the memory of your own life experiences. Your first day of college, a vacation, your cousin's chaotic wedding, the time you dropped your phone in a puddle, all of it. Episodic equals episodes of your life. 2. Semantic memory. This one's your internal encyclopedia. It stores general knowledge and facts. Things like Paris is the capital of France. 2 plus 2 equals 4. Or George Washington was the first U.S. president. You know it, but you don't necessarily remember when or where you learned it. Together, episodic and semantic memories comprise your declarative memory, the what I know side of long-term memory. Procedural memory, knowing how. Now, procedural memory is a whole different beast. This is the muscle memory of the mind, the stuff you don't have to think about consciously. It's how you remember how to ride a bike, type on a keyboard, drive a car, or tie your shoes. You don't sit there.
It's time for another knowledge check. So, which of the following is an example of prospective memory? Would it be A, knowing that grass is green? Or can it be B, remembering your first kiss? It could be C, recognizing the names of colors. Or would it be D, remembering to pick up flowers for your partner on an anniversary? Doesn't that sound sweet? Anyway, which one do you think would be representative of prospective memory? I won't give y'all the Jeopardy music this time. But if you need more time to think, I would suggest pausing the video, because I'm about to move on. All right, so if you said D, remembering to pick up flowers for your partner on an anniversary, then you have the correct answer. So remember, prospective memory is that kind of memory that is for future actions, like trying to remember to pick up those flowers for your partner. It has meaning in terms of semantic memory. You have to remember these are memories about facts. And then you have also, like if you want to know that the grass is green or recognizing the name of colors, that's where that semantic memory may fall in. Finally, again, there's episodic memory, and this is that memory for personal experience, like the time when you had that first kiss. So, there you go.
Now, let's discuss the constructionist theory, memory as a creative reconstruction. Here's a spoiler alert or a truth bomb. Your memory isn't a video camera. It doesn't record the past. It actually reconstructs it. So that's the central idea behind the constructionist theory, which is the leading view of memory today. According to this theory, memory is not a perfect replica of what happened, but rather a representation or reconstruction of the past, based on bits and pieces your brain stitches together. It's like your mind is saying, okay, I remember some of this and I'll fill in the rest so it makes sense. Sounds handy, right? Well, sometimes that filling in goes a little too far. Let's use the telephone game of memory to try to understand this. Think of memories like that childhood game of telephone where one person whispers a message to the next. By the time it reaches the last person, the message has morphed into something hilariously different. The cat ate my homework becomes Mac baked a snowstorm. That's how our memories work too. Every time we recall an event, we're actually rebuilding it, pulling pieces from the original memory and mixing in new bits from our current emotions, beliefs, and even other experiences. Over time, the details shift, just a little here and there, until the memory may not match what really happened at all. When rebuilding becomes rewriting, here's where it can get tricky. Because these reconstructions feel real, they can turn into false memories, vivid, emotionally charged recollections of things that never actually happened. For instance, someone might remember seeing a friend at a party who wasn't there, or being lost at the mall as a child when it never occurred. They're not lying, their brain has just filled in gaps to create a coherent but inaccurate story. Psychologist Elizabeth Loftus has done groundbreaking work in this area, showing how easily memories can be distorted by suggestion, imagination, or misleading information, the misinformation effect. Now, you should take away this. Memory isn't about the perfect playback. It's about meaning making. Your brain. When discussing the reliability of long-term memory, we should understand the misinformation effect when memory gets rewritten. Let's start with this. Your memory is not a courtroom transcript. It's more like a story that your brain keeps editing. The misinformation effect happens when false or misleading information sneaks in between the time an event occurs and when you try to recall it. That time gap is called the retention interval. Once that new information settles in, it can actually change or distort your original memory. In other words, your brain doesn't just store memories, it updates them. And sometimes those updates are flat out wrong. A good example of this would be, imagine you witness a car accident. You clearly remember seeing a blue Honda run a stop sign. But a few days later, someone says, yeah, that red Toyota came out of nowhere, huh? Now your brain is like, wait, was it red or blue, Toyota, Honda? Over time, your memory starts to shift toward the new information until you're confidently recalling a red Toyota that never existed. Baffling, isn't it? That's the misinformation effect in action. New details blend with old ones until the boundary between fact and fiction blurs. So something you should be aware of. Eyewitness testimony. This effect is especially dangerous in the courtroom. Eyewitness testimony can be powerful. Juries tend to trust people who say, "I saw it with my own eyes." But decades of research show that eyewitness memory is shockingly fragile and easily influenced. Psychologist Elizabeth Loftus demonstrated this with her car crash studies. Participants watched a video of a minor accident and were later asked, how fast were the cars going when they hit each other, versus how fast were the cars going when they smashed each other. Just that one word, smashed, made people remember broken glass that wasn't even there. Language literally reshaped their memory. So, what affects accuracy? Whether an eyewitness remembers something accurately depends on a mix of factors. Ease of recall, how clear or recent the memory is. Degree of confidence. Fun fact, confidence doesn't always. So we are almost finished with the overview of memories. The last area I want to touch upon is repressed memories. Real, false, or something in between. Okay, so picture this. Someone goes into therapy as an adult, and doing hypnosis or guided imagery, they suddenly remember something traumatic from childhood that they had no previous awareness of. Maybe it's described as a repressed memory. That's a memory so painful that the mind supposedly buried it deep down, only for it to resurface years later. This idea feels powerful. The thought that the mind can protect itself from unbearable pain. But it's also one of the most controversial topics in psychology. Now at the core of the controversy. On one hand, we know that people can forget parts of trauma, especially if they were very young or if the trauma was overwhelming. It's not unusual for survivors to have gaps or fragmented memories of what happened. Sometimes those details come back in bits and flashes, especially when they feel safe enough to process them. But here's where it gets sticky. It's sporadic for someone to forget a major traumatic event completely and then recall it perfectly years later. That's because trauma tends to be too powerful to vanish entirely. It may fade or distort, but it doesn't usually disappear without a trace. Therefore, there's a problem with recovered memories. Many of these so-called repressed memories have surfaced during hypnosis or certain kinds of psychotherapy, where a therapist may encourage a person to look deeper or remember what's been blocked. While the intention might be good, to help someone heal, this process can accidentally plant ideas that turn into vivid but false memories. Why? Because our brains are suggestible. When we're in a relaxed, imaginative, or emotional state, such as hypnosis, the line between imagination and memory can become blurred. A suggestion like, "Could something bad have happened when you were little?" can make the brain fill in the blanks, and the image feels real even if it's not historically accurate. Psychologists like Elizabeth Loftus have demonstrated that it's surprisingly easy to create false memories. For example, convincing someone they were lost in a mall as a child when it never happened. These memories feel real, carry emotion, and even include sensory detail, but they're reconstructed, not retrieved. That's why courts, therapists, and scientists now approach recovered memory claims with extreme caution. It's not about calling anyone a liar. It's about understanding that memory is reconstructive, and sincere people can vividly remember things that didn't occur exactly as recalled. Just remember, our memories are powerful, but they're also malleable. We can feel utterly convinced about something that didn't quite happen the way we think. So, when someone remembers a long-forgotten trauma, the question isn't simply, is it real or fake? It's, how did this memory form? and what does it mean for the person?
Right, so now it's time to do our attendance as we start to wrap up this module that we've been working on, which was memory, module 6.1. Just don't forget to do your attendance, okay? I know a lot of people are saying they do it and then they want to know why it's not being done. If you're not clicking on your JSU ID number, that might be a reason why it's not showing. So please remember to do your attendance. If you need to pause this and scan it, please do so, because this is the only way you will get credit for today, which is Monday, October 6th, 2025. With that being said, I got a few closing comments and then we'll talk again on Wednesday. All right, so this is the end of module 6.1, like I mentioned. On Wednesday, we'll get started on 6.2, where we'll be talking about forgetting. And I haven't forgotten, your grades have been already entered into pause. So you should be able to see it. If not, you will see it after 5 p.m. today. But I've already put it in. If you missed the exam, you need documentation to explain why you missed the exam, because again, the exam is open for a 24-hour period. And I'm only accepting documentation to consider creating a makeup. I wanted to say this, that you have until this Friday coming to request for a makeup exam. Remember, there's only one given per semester, and that's either between exam number 1 or exam number 2. So we are at exam number 2. If you need to have a makeup done because you missed the exam, please send me a message in the inbox providing a detailed explanation why you missed it, along with documentation, so that I can consider whether or not you will qualify for a makeup exam. If you qualify, the makeup exam will be given on Friday. Okay, so it won't be immediate. You'll get preparation to be ready to take it on Friday. I will send you information whether or not you've been approved, and that will be the only notification you will get. So make sure you jot it down in your calendars, on your phones, and so forth. Overall, the class did pretty well. We had some people that was on a skew of struggling a little bit, but I'm hoping that we can improve that down the line. Because now we're into the second half, and as you can see, the semester is going quite quickly. Again, we'll be meeting up on Wednesday, and I look forward to seeing you then. On that note, thanks for listening.